What's good, everyone? Welcome to Reddit Story Dose. I read the craziest stories from Reddit so you don't have to. Today we've got 5 stories that will blow your mind. Let's get started. From Petty Revenge. Our neighbor kept snooping through everyone's houses, so he covered her home in googly eyes. This is a story about Judy. And if you have ever had a nosy neighbor, the kind who lingers a little too long at your front door, whose eyes drift past you and into your living room every time you open it, you will love every second of it. My mom belongs to a group of women in her neighborhood who have been meeting regularly for years. I think it started sometime in the early 2000s, back when my sister and I were still in school and mom needed something that was just hers. They rotate hosting duties. One month it is at Susan's house, the next at Barbara's, then Carol's, and so on. It is a lovely tradition. Tea, gossip, laughter. Someone always brings a cake or a pie that they claim is nothing special, but clearly took 2 hours to make. These women have seen each other through divorces, surgeries, grandchildren, and everything in between. It is sacred to them in a way that I did not fully understand until I was older. But there was a problem, and her name was Judy. Judy moved into the neighborhood about 6 years ago and joined the group shortly after. She was pleasant enough on the surface. Always complimented whatever was served. Always asked about everyone's kids. But there was something about Judy that felt just slightly off. Like she was gathering information rather than making conversation. My mom described it once as talking to someone who is listening, but not in a good way. And then there was the habit. Whenever the group met at someone's house, Judy would excuse herself to use the bathroom. Nothing unusual about that. A room full of women drinking tea for 2 hours. People are going to need the restroom. Except Judy never came back within a normal bathroom timeframe. She would be gone for 10, 15, sometimes 20 minutes. Long enough for someone to say, "Is Judy okay?" Long enough for the conversation to loop through an entire topic and start a new one before she reappeared. My mom started noticing something else too. When Judy returned, she would come from the direction of the bedrooms, not the bathroom. She would drift back into the living room from the hallway with this casual little smile, smoothing the front of her blouse like she had just been adjusting herself in a mirror. My mom thought she was imagining it at first. But then it happened again. And again. One time, at Barbara's house, my mom excused herself to get something from her purse, which she had left in the front hall. On her way back, she passed the master bedroom at the end of the corridor. The door was slightly open. And there was Judy, standing inside, her hand on the closet door, just looking in. Not frantically. Not guiltily. Just looking, like she was browsing a department store. My mom froze. For a second, they locked eyes. Judy blinked, smiled, and said, "Oh, I was looking for the bathroom. These hallways all look the same, don't they?" She walked right past my mom and back to the living room without missing a beat. That night, Mom called Susan. "Has Judy ever disappeared in your house for a suspiciously long time?" Susan was quiet for a moment, then said, "Oh, thank God someone else noticed." Mom mentioned it to the other women over the next few days. Turns out, every single one of them had noticed the same thing. Barbara had found a drawer in her nightstand slightly open after one gathering. Carol swore a stack of mail on her desk had been moved. Susan's husband had asked why the closet light in their guest room was on after the last meeting. Judy was using bathroom breaks as an excuse to snoop through their private spaces. Going through bedrooms, opening closets, peeking in drawers. Methodically. In every house. When one of the women, Carol, who has never been afraid of confrontation in her life, finally asked Judy directly, "Judy, why were you in my bedroom?" Judy's face went through about 4 expressions in 2 seconds. Surprise. Offense. Confusion. Then calm dismissal. "Oh, I just got turned around. Your house is so confusing with all those doors." She waved her hand like she was swatting a fly. "Honestly, Carol, I don't know what you're implying, but I don't appreciate it." She acted so offended that Carol actually felt guilty for a moment. That is how good Judy was. But the women talked. And they decided on a response. Not a confrontation. Carol had already tried that, and Judy had shut it down cold. No, they needed something else. Something that would send a message without giving Judy anything to argue against. It was my mom who came up with the idea, actually. She was at the craft store picking up supplies for my niece's birthday party when she saw them, a bulk pack of googly eye stickers. The craft kind with the little black pupils that wobble when you move them. She stood in the aisle for a full minute, staring at the package, and then she started laughing so hard that another customer asked if she was all right. She bought 6 sheets. Then she called the group. The next time the gathering was at Judy's house, the women came prepared. Each of them had a sheet of googly eyes tucked into their purse. They sipped their tea. They complimented Judy's new curtains. They laughed at the usual stories. And during the evening, whenever Judy turned her back, whenever she went to the kitchen to refill the kettle, whenever she bent down to pick something up, they stuck googly eyes everywhere. On picture frames, on the refrigerator magnets, on the bathroom mirror, right at eye level, on the lampshades in the living room, tiny ones on the spines of books, 2 big ones on the face of the grandfather clock. Susan stuck a pair on every single knob on Judy's kitchen cabinets. Barbara put them on the TV remote. Carol, bless her, went outside during a phone call and stuck them on the garden gnome in the backyard. She gave him 2 enormous ones so he looked permanently startled. On their way out, the women hit the mailbox, the front porch railing, the doorbell, and every single fence post along Judy's front yard. They said their goodbyes. They hugged Judy. They told her what a lovely evening it had been. And they drove home and laughed until they cried. The next morning, according to the neighbor across the street, who relayed the whole thing to my mom in delighted detail, Judy came outside at 7:30 in the morning in her bathrobe. She stood on the porch, staring at the railing. Then she looked at the mailbox. Then she turned around and looked at the front door. She went back inside. A few minutes later, she came back out with a plastic bag and started peeling googly eyes off every surface of her property. She was at it for hours. The garden gnome alone apparently took her 5 minutes because the stickers had bonded to the paint in the cold overnight air. The neighbor said Judy was muttering to herself the entire time, stopping every few minutes to look around as if she might find more she had missed. She never confronted the group about it. Not a single word. Not a passive-aggressive comment, not a pointed joke, nothing. But the message was received loud and clear. We see everything too, Judy. And the snooping stopped. Next up, my neighbor's landlord demolished our shared wall without a permit. Now he might go to jail. This might be the most satisfying revenge story I have ever lived through, and the beautiful part is I barely had to lift a finger. Well, I lifted a pen. Several times. But that is kind of the point. I work as a lawyer specializing in construction permits. I spend my days reviewing building applications, cross-referencing zoning regulations, and catching violations that most people would not notice if they were painted in neon. I know building codes the way most people know their favorite TV shows, intimately, obsessively, and with the ability to quote specific episodes from memory. And my neighbor's landlord made the critical mistake of breaking the law right next to someone who enforces it for a living. Let me set the scene. I live in a quiet residential neighborhood. The kind of street where people wave at each other in the morning and complain about leaves in the gutter. It is not exciting, and that is exactly why I bought there. After 10-hour days buried in permit applications and municipal hearings, the last thing I want is noise. Then a man I will call Jack bought the house next to mine. Jack owned a timber company and needed cheap housing for his foreign construction workers. Rather than set them up somewhere appropriate, he crammed 4 to 6 men into the small 2-bedroom house and essentially let them do whatever they wanted on weekends. From Thursday night to Monday morning, it was a non-stop party. I am not talking about a few beers and some laughter. I mean music shaking my bedroom wall at 2 in the morning. Bass so heavy I could feel it in my chest while I was lying in bed trying to sleep. Arguments spilling into the yard at all hours, shouting in languages I did not understand but with a tone that was universally recognizable as drunk and aggressive. One Saturday morning I found beer cans in my flower bed. Another time, someone had urinated against my fence. I tried being reasonable at first. I walked over one Friday evening, knocked on the door, and when a stocky guy in a tank top opened it, I smiled and said, "Hey, I am your neighbor. Any chance you could keep it down after midnight?" He looked at me like I had asked him to solve a calculus problem, shrugged, and said, "No English, sorry." Then he shut the door. The music got louder 10 minutes later. I called the police more times than I can count. Each time, a patrol car would roll by, the music would dip for an hour, and then it would creep right back up. Noise complaints in our area are treated like parking tickets, a minor inconvenience, not a real consequence. I watched my complaints pile up in the system and go absolutely nowhere. My wife started sleeping with earplugs. I started grinding my teeth at night. Nothing changed. Then Jack made his big mistake. He decided to renovate the house. I suppose he wanted to squeeze more workers in, or maybe the place was falling apart from the abuse it was taking every weekend. Either way, one morning I heard the unmistakable sound of a sledgehammer hitting masonry. I walked to my window with my coffee and watched two of his workers tearing down a section of wall. Not just any wall, the wall that sat directly on the property line. A wall that, under our local property laws, I co-owned. I set my coffee down. I stood there for a long moment, watching dust billow up from the crumbling bricks. I felt my heart rate pick up, but not from anger. From something else entirely. Recognition. Jack had demolished a shared wall without my permission, without notifying me, and most importantly, without a single building permit. I could hear my wife calling from the kitchen. "What is going on out there?" I smiled. Genuinely smiled. "Christmas came early," I said. Now, most people would have stormed outside and yelled at their neighbor. Maybe filed a complaint with the homeowners association. Maybe called a lawyer. But I am not most people. I am the person who reviews permit applications for a living. I know exactly what happens when you skip the process, because I am the process. I did not rush. That is the key. I took my time. Over the next 3 days, I documented everything. I photographed the demolished wall from multiple angles with timestamps. I photographed the workers on site without hard hats or safety equipment. I noted the lack of any posted permit notice, which is required by law to be visible from the street during any renovation. I pulled up the property survey and confirmed exactly where the boundary line fell. I checked the municipal database and confirmed what I already knew: there was no permit on file. Then I filed a formal report with the municipal building authority. Not a complaint. A report. There is a difference. A complaint gets tossed in a pile. A report from a licensed construction permit lawyer, filed with specific code citations and photographic evidence, gets attention. The city sent an inspector within the week. He took one look at the site, shook his head, and issued a stop work order on the spot. I watched from my kitchen window as the inspector taped the bright orange notice to Jack's front door. I will not pretend I did not enjoy that moment, because I did. Deeply. Jack scrambled. He hired a contractor to submit a retroactive permit application, hoping to legitimize the work after the fact. I have seen this move 100 times in my career. Sometimes it works, if the work meets code and the violations are minor. But Jack's situation was not minor. The city denied his retroactive application. The structural modifications did not meet current safety standards. The shared wall demolition required my written consent, which he obviously did not have. And several of the electrical and plumbing changes his workers had made were nowhere close to code. He appealed. Of course he appealed. And I showed up at the appeal hearing. I sat in the back row with a binder full of documentation, photographs, survey maps, code references, a timeline of every noise complaint I had filed, and a letter from my own structural engineer confirming that the remaining wall section was now compromised. When Jack's contractor tried to argue that the work was substantially compliant, I raised my hand and asked to speak. The hearing officer recognized me. We had crossed paths professionally. I laid out my case calmly, methodically, pointing to each violation like I was teaching a class. Jack sat there with his mouth slightly open. I do not think he had any idea what I did for a living until that moment. The appeal was denied unanimously. But it did not stop there. Because he had demolished a shared wall without authorization, the city was required to initiate criminal proceedings. In our jurisdiction, unauthorized demolition of shared property is not just a civil fine. It is a criminal offense that carries the possibility of imprisonment. Jack received a summons. His face went pale when the city attorney explained the potential penalties. Jack's entire operation began to unravel after that. His property value plummeted because of the unresolved building violations. No bank would touch a mortgage on a house with active code enforcement cases. He could not sell it. He could not legally rent it in its current state. And his construction business faced scrutiny from the licensing board, because the logic was simple and devastating. If he was cutting corners on his own property, what was he doing on client jobs? An audit was opened. I heard through the grapevine that he lost 2 major contracts. The workers got a lot quieter after that. Some of them moved out. The ones who stayed kept to themselves. No more Thursday night parties. No more bass rattling my walls at 3 in the morning. No more beer cans in my flower bed. My wife took out her earplugs. I stopped grinding my teeth. And I did not have to raise my voice once. Sometimes the best revenge is simply knowing which forms to fill out. This next one is wild. AITA? Our parents are giving our sister double the inheritance because she babysat us growing up. My parents recently told us how they plan to divide their estate, and my brothers and I are furious. But my parents insist they are being fair, and I genuinely cannot tell who is right anymore. I have been losing sleep over this for 2 weeks now, replaying the conversation in my head, and I need outside perspective before this tears my family apart. There are 5 of us. My oldest sister Claire is 39. Then my brother James is 36, I am 33, my brother David is 30, and our youngest brother Tommy is 27. We are not a dramatic family. We do holidays together. We have a group chat that is mostly memes and pictures of the kids. Until 3 weeks ago, I would have said we were close. Growing up, Claire was the de facto babysitter. Both our parents worked full-time. My dad was a route driver for a beverage distributor, and my mom worked reception at a dental office. Neither job had flexibility. From the time Claire was about 12, she was responsible for watching the 4 of us after school, on weekends, and during summer breaks. She cooked dinner most nights. Not fancy stuff, but she kept us fed: mac and cheese, chicken nuggets, spaghetti with jar sauce. She helped with homework. She broke up fights. She cleaned scraped knees and made sure Tommy did not stick things in electrical outlets when he was going through that phase. When she got her license at 16, she became our personal taxi, driving us to soccer practice, piano lessons, birthday parties, whatever we needed. Did Claire do a lot? Yes, absolutely. None of us deny that. But we were kids. We did not ask to be born. And Claire did not have a choice either. Our parents assigned her that role. She was a child too. Now our parents have announced their plan. It happened at Sunday dinner 3 weeks ago. My dad stood up after dessert, which was already weird because my dad does not make speeches. He cleared his throat and said, "Your mother and I have been working with a lawyer on our estate plan, and we want to be transparent with all of you about our decisions." I remember my mom was gripping her coffee mug with both hands, staring at the table. She already knew how this was going to go. Their estate is worth approximately $800,000, the house, retirement accounts, some investments they have been quietly building for years. Instead of splitting it evenly, $160,000 each, they want to give Claire 2/5. That is $320,000. The remaining $480,000 would be split among the 4 of us, $120,000 each. The room went dead silent. I looked at James first. His jaw was tight and he was doing that thing where he presses his tongue against the inside of his cheek. David put his fork down slowly. Tommy actually laughed, like a short, disbelieving exhale, because he thought it was a joke. Claire did not look surprised. She already knew. Their reasoning is that Claire sacrificed her childhood for the family and was never compensated. My dad said, and I remember this almost word for word, "Your sister gave up years of her life so that this family could function. She never complained. She never got a dime for it. Your mother and I have carried that guilt for a long time, and this is how we want to make it right." My mom nodded, her eyes already red. "She was just a little girl," she said quietly. "We put too much on her." James was the first to speak up. "So you are punishing us for something you decided to do 30 years ago?" My dad's face hardened immediately. "Nobody is being punished. You are each still receiving a significant inheritance. David jumped in. 120,000 versus 320,000 is not equal, Dad. That is not even close. My father said, it is not supposed to be equal. It is supposed to be fair. That word, fair, has been rattling around in my head ever since. James, David, Tommy, and I disagree with the plan. We think this is favoritism dressed up as justice. Claire was not an employee. She was a daughter doing what her parents told her to do, the same way we all did chores and followed rules. And if our parents feel guilty about making her babysit, that guilt should not come out of our inheritance. They could have hired help. They could have found another arrangement. They chose not to, and now they want the four of us to subsidize their regret. Claire says she earned every cent of the extra share. After dinner, when things got heated and my dad shut the conversation down, Claire pulled me aside in the kitchen. She was shaking, but her voice was steady. Do you have any idea what it was like? She said. I was 14 years old making sure 4 kids were alive every single day. My friends were at the mall. They were at sleepovers. They were trying out for the school play. I was at home warming up chicken tenders and helping James with long division. She told me she used to cry in the bathroom after we all went to bed. She said she resented us for years before she worked through it in therapy. I am not asking for your money, she said. Mom and Dad are choosing to acknowledge what happened to me. And honestly, it does not even come close to covering what I lost. She is not wrong about that. I remember Claire always being there. I remember her being tired. I remember her missing her own prom because Tommy had a stomach bug and my parents could not get off work. She sat on the couch in sweatpants watching a movie with a bucket next to a sick 8-year-old while her classmates were dancing. I think about that now as a 33-year-old and it makes my chest hurt. But we did not make that choice. Our parents did. When we pushed back as a group, James drafted a letter, which felt extreme but also necessary. Our father called a family meeting. He sat at the head of the table and said, "This is not a negotiation. Your mother and I built this estate. It is ours to distribute as we see fit. We love all of you equally, but love does not mean identical treatment." My mother cried. She said she thought we would understand. She said she hoped that we could see this from Claire's perspective, that we could be generous enough to recognize her sacrifice. "I thought I raised you all to be empathetic," she said, and that one landed like a punch. Tommy said, "We are empathetic, Mom. But empathy does not mean we have to agree that this is fair." David nodded. James said nothing, just stared at his hands. Claire was not at that meeting. She told me later she could not stomach sitting in a room where her brothers argued that she did not deserve recognition for raising them. "That is what it feels like," she said. "Even if that is not what you mean. I feel terrible. I do not want to fight about money. I genuinely do not. A month ago I did not even know there was an estate to argue about. But I also do not want to accept a system where one sibling gets double because our parents feel guilty about decisions they made 30 years ago. If they wanted to compensate Claire, they could have done it at any point. Paid for her college, given her money directly, anything. Why does it have to come out of what would otherwise be shared equally? And yet, I keep hearing her voice in the kitchen. I keep thinking about prom night and the bucket. I keep wondering if we are fighting for fairness or just fighting because it is easier to be angry than to sit with the uncomfortable truth that our sister paid a price none of us ever had to. Are we the jerks for pushing back? I honestly do not know anymore. Next up, woman at the dog park demanded I give her my dog because her kids were attached. I take my golden retriever, Maple, to the dog park every Saturday morning. It's been our routine for almost 4 years now. Coffee in my travel mug, tennis ball in my jacket pocket, and Maple practically vibrating with excitement the second I pick up my keys. She knows the sound. She knows what Saturday means. Maple is the friendliest dog you will ever meet. She has never met a stranger. Kids, other dogs, squirrels she will never catch. She loves anything that breathes and gives her even a second of attention. Her tail could power a small wind turbine. 3 weeks ago, a woman showed up at the park with 2 children, roughly 5 and 7. No dog, no leash, just the 3 of them walking through the gate into the off-leash area. I noticed because it was a little unusual. Most people without dogs stick to the playground on the other side of the parking lot. But I did not think much of it. Some people just like watching dogs, and honestly, who could blame them? Maple, being Maple, spotted the kids within about 15 seconds and trotted straight over, tail going full helicopter. The younger one squealed and dropped to her knees, and Maple immediately rolled onto her back for belly rubs. The older boy was a little more cautious at first, but within a minute he was sitting cross-legged on the grass with Maple's head in his lap. They were in heaven. All three of them, really. Maple included. The woman walked over to me and we started chatting. She asked about Maple's breed, her age, her temperament. I told her Maple was a golden retriever, 6 years old, and had the personality of a greeting card, all love, all the time. She laughed at that. Normal conversation. I did not think anything of it. People ask me about Maple constantly. She is that kind of dog. They stayed for maybe 45 minutes. The kids hugged Maple before they left, and the little girl said, "Bye-bye, puppy," in that voice kids use that could melt concrete. Maple watched them walk to their car and then looked up at me like, "Where are my friends going?" I scratched her ears, threw the tennis ball, and we went on with our morning. The following Saturday, the same woman and kids were there again. This time they were already inside the park when we arrived. Maple recognized the kids immediately. Her ears perked up and she pulled on the leash so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. The second I unclipped her, she sprinted across the field and slid into the little girl like she was stealing home base. More playing, more petting, more joy. The boy had brought a stick this time and was throwing it for Maple. She was having the time of her life. I sat on the bench and the woman came over again. We talked for a bit, and then she asked me something that made my radar ping for the first time. She asked if I ever let Maple have playdates at other people's houses. Like, without me there. I said no. I said I appreciated how much her kids loved Maple, but she does not do sleepovers. I smiled when I said it, keeping it light. The woman nodded, but she had this look on her face, like she was filing that answer away rather than accepting it. I mentioned it to my buddy that night over beers. He said I was overthinking it. Maybe I was. I let it go. Last Saturday, she was waiting for me when I arrived. Not inside the park. In the parking lot. Leaning against her car, arms crossed, watching the entrance. The kids were in the backseat. Something about the whole picture felt off. Intentional. Staged. I got Maple out of the car and the woman walked up before I even had the leash on. She said she wanted to discuss something important. Her voice was different. Serious. Almost rehearsed. I assumed maybe her kids had developed allergies and she needed to tell me, or maybe she wanted to set up a more structured playdate at the park. Something reasonable. Instead, she said her children had become very attached to Maple and she thought it would be best if Maple went to live with them. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud because I was so sure she was joking. It was the kind of thing you laugh at because your brain cannot process it as a real sentence that a real person just said to you in a parking lot at 9 in the morning. She was not joking. Her expression did not change. Not even a little. She said her kids had been asking about Maple every single day since they first met her. She said they talked about her at dinner, drew pictures of her at school. She said they had already named her Princess. They had already set up a bed for her in their room. A pink dog bed from Target, she specified, as if that detail was supposed to make me feel something. She said that since I was just a single person with no children, Maple would have a better life with a real family. She actually used those words. A real family. I felt my stomach drop first, and then this slow, hot wave of anger rising up from my chest. I kept my voice as steady as I could. I told her that Maple was my dog. She had been my dog for 6 years. I got her as a puppy. I trained her, I walk her every day. I hold her when the thunder scares her, I pay her vet bills. I know which ear she likes scratched and which toy she sleeps with. She was not for sale, not for trade, and not for adoption. The woman's tone shifted like a switch had been flipped. The polite, friendly mask was gone. She said I was being selfish. She said her children were going to be heartbroken, and that would be my fault. She said she could see that Maple wanted to be with them, that the dog had chosen them. Then she said she would report me for animal neglect if I did not cooperate. I asked her to name one thing I was neglecting. One single thing. She could not. She just repeated that Maple deserved a family with children. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from the effort of keeping my voice calm while this stranger stood in a parking lot and told me she deserved my dog. Maple was sitting at my feet, leaning against my leg like she always does, completely oblivious to the insanity happening above her head. I said I was leaving. I picked up Maple, put her in the car, got in, and started backing out. The woman stepped in front of my car, just walked right behind it and stood there. My heart was hammering. She leaned down to my window and said she was going to call the police. I put the car in park. I looked her dead in the eyes. I said please do. I said I would love to show them Maple's 6 years of vet records, her county registration, and her microchip, all in my name. Every single document. I said I would wait right here. Something shifted in her face. The confidence cracked. She stared at me for about 5 seconds that felt like 5 minutes, and then she moved. She just stepped aside without another word. I drove home with my hands still shaking on the steering wheel and Maple riding shotgun with her head out the window like nothing had happened. Because for her, nothing had. I have not been back to that dog park. I found a new one about 15 minutes farther out. It is smaller and the parking lot is gravel, but nobody there has tried to take my dog, so it is perfect. Maple is at home right now, sleeping on my couch with her head on the armrest and one paw hanging off the edge. She is completely unaware that a stranger spent 3 weeks building a case to take her away from me. She does not know that 2 kids somewhere have a pink dog bed with no dog in it. She has no idea. She remains blissfully, beautifully unbothered. And she is still my dog. She will always be my dog. Here's another one for you. Someone demanded I give their kids a free PlayStation. When I said no, they said God would judge me. I was selling my old PlayStation on a local marketplace. Nothing dramatic, nothing special. I had upgraded a few months back and the old console had been sitting on my shelf ever since, still perfectly functional but completely ignored. Good condition, all cables included, 2 controllers, one black, one blue, both with decent grip left on the thumbsticks. I cleaned it up, took some photos in good lighting on my kitchen table, and posted it. Asking price, $200. Fair for what it was. Maybe even a little generous considering everything that came with it. Within an hour, I got a message. My phone buzzed while I was making dinner, and I figured it was someone asking if the price was negotiable or wanting to know if it had any scratches. Normal stuff. But when I opened it, there was no offer. No question. A demand. The message read, I see you have a PlayStation. My kids deserve it. They have been through a lot this year and I cannot afford to buy them one. Please give it to them. God is watching. I stared at my phone for a good 30 seconds. I even reread it to make sure I was not misunderstanding the tone. Nope, this person was not asking. They were telling me, as if I had some moral obligation to hand over my property to a complete stranger because they invoked God and the word deserve in the same sentence. I set my phone down, took a breath, and responded politely. I typed out something along the lines of, I'm really sorry to hear about your situation, and I hope things get better for your family. Unfortunately, I'm selling this, not giving it away. You might want to check with local charities. A lot of them do holiday gift drives this time of year and they sometimes have electronics. I thought that was reasonable. Compassionate, even. I hit send and went back to stirring my pasta. The response was immediate and aggressive. It came in so fast I wondered if they had it pre-written. They said I was greedy for selling something I clearly did not need anymore. They said if I already had a new system, what difference did it make to just let this one go? They said their children cried every day because they did not have a gaming system. Literal tears. Every single day. They said I had no heart and that people like me were what was wrong with the world. I could feel my jaw tightening as I read it. There is something uniquely frustrating about being insulted by someone who is simultaneously asking you for a favor. I wanted to fire back, but I kept it together. I simply repeated that the item was for sale at $200. They countered with $20. $20. For a PlayStation with 2 controllers and every cable it came with. I said no. They said $30. I said the price was $200. They said $50 and added a, that's my final offer, as if they were doing me some kind of favor. I stared at the ceiling for a moment, set my phone face down on the counter, and stopped responding. There was no version of this conversation that was going anywhere productive. Then came the guilt finale. A long, sprawling paragraph, the kind you have to scroll through, about how they were a single parent working 3 jobs. About how their kids had nothing. How the other children at school made fun of them. How Christmas was right around the corner and this would be the only gift they received. How if I had any decency, any shred of basic human compassion left in my soul, I would donate the PlayStation because it was just sitting in your house collecting dust anyway. They even threw in a line about how they would pray for me regardless of my decision, which somehow felt more aggressive than any of the insults. I sat there reading it and I will not lie, for about 5 seconds, I felt a pang of guilt. That is the thing about these messages. They are designed to make you feel like the villain in someone else's story. But then I looked around my apartment. I looked at my own stack of bills on the kitchen counter. I looked at my bank account balance, which was not exactly overflowing with generosity money. And I typed back the truth. I pointed out that it was not collecting dust. It was actively listed for sale, which is the opposite of collecting dust. And that I also have bills to pay. My rent does not care about anyone's feelings, mine included. Their final message arrived about 2 minutes later. I could almost hear the dramatic exhale through the screen. God will remember how you treated his children today. Enjoy your $200 in hell. I read it twice. Then I laughed. Not a chuckle, a real laugh. The kind that catches you off guard in your own kitchen at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night. I screenshotted it and sent it to my best friend, who responded with a string of crying laughing emojis and the words, "These people are unreal." I sold the PlayStation the next day to a college student named Marcus who drove 20 minutes to my place, handed me $200 in cash, tested the controllers for about 30 seconds, nodded, and said, "Awesome, thank you so much." That was it. No guilt trips. No invocations of the divine. No tears. Just a fair transaction between 2 normal human beings. He tucked the console under his arm, shook my hand, and left. The whole exchange took less than 10 minutes. It was beautiful in its simplicity. I figured that was the end of it. A weird encounter, a good story for parties, nothing more. 2 weeks later, my phone buzzed with a marketplace notification. I opened it and felt my eyebrows climb halfway up my forehead. It was the same person. Same profile. Same picture. Asking, and I swear I am not making this up, if I had any other electronics I would be willing to donate. Not sell. Donate. As if our previous conversation had ended on friendly terms. As if they had not condemned me to eternal hellfire over a gaming console 14 days earlier. I did not respond, but I did something better. I pulled up the screenshots from our original conversation, blurred out their profile picture because I am not a complete monster, and posted them in the local buy and sell group with a simple caption. Just a heads up, folks. Within an hour, the comments started rolling in. And that is when I realized I was not special. Turns out, this person had sent nearly identical messages to over a dozen sellers in our area. Same script. Same guilt trip. Same, God is watching, sign off. Other people started posting their own screenshots, and they were almost word-for-word copies. The single parent, the 3 jobs, the crying children, the Christmas deadline, all of it, templated and deployed like some kind of spiritual spam campaign. The group had a field day. Someone even made a bingo card. God may be watching, but apparently, so is everyone on the marketplace.